Imagine I told you there was a lifestyle habit spreading globally that is actually worse for your physical survival than obesity.
Oh, yeah, the stats on this are wild.
Right, like worse than never exercising. In fact, it carries a mortality impact that's exactly as deadly as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day.
Which is just a staggering comparison.
It really is. And, if you heard that, you'd probably assume it was some new synthetic drug or maybe, I don't know, an environmental toxin we're all breathing in.
Yeah, you'd want the CDC on it immediately.
Exactly, you'd want a vaccine. But it's not a virus. It's this simple, everyday act of sitting alone in your room,
It's the ultimate silent epidemic. I mean, you can't draw blood to test for it, there's no visible pathogen, but it is fundamentally altering global mortality rates.
which is terrifying.
Yeah, and because it's invisible, it's incredibly easy to brush off as a personal failure, rather than a massive systemic crisis.
And that brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. We're going to unpack this massive, invisible shift in our global society.
The loneliness epidemic.
The loneliness epidemic, exactly. The total collapse of our physical gathering spots and the rise of a multi-trillion-dollar machine that researchers are now calling the loneliness economy.
It's a fascinating term.
It is. And we've got an incredible stack of sources today to help us navigate this. We're pulling from U.S. Surgeon General advisories, the World Health Organization, the Kaiser Family Foundation.
Really robust data sets.
Yeah, and we're mixing that public health data with hard economic numbers, right? Market reports on the global gaming industry, hospitality data on bar closures, and academic reviews on consumer psychology.
Because our goal here is to connect these seemingly disparate dots. We want to take a look at how your own highly personal feelings of isolation might actually be the primary fuel for a massive macroeconomic shift.
Right, like how your quiet Friday night is actually moving billions of dollars.
Exactly. We're going to look at the traditional industries that are bleeding cash and the new digital monoliths that are, well, swooping in to monetize our lack of human connection.
So if you're listening to this right now, maybe you're commuting in a car by yourself, or working remotely from your kitchen table, or just taking a solitary walk with your headphones in, you are actively participating in the very societal structure we're about to dissect.
We all are, really.
Yeah. Let's start with the sheer scale of the problem, because it's almost hard to wrap your head around just how pervasive this is.
It's staggering once you look at the raw data. I mean, if you take a global snapshot, roughly 1 in 6 people worldwide currently suffer from profound loneliness.
1 in 6. Wow.
Yeah, globally.
Right.
And if you zoom in on the United States specifically, the numbers get even heavier. In recent years, about 1 in 2 adults in America report experiencing loneliness.
Half the adult population.
Half, essentially navigating their days feeling entirely disconnected.
See, my assumptions immediately bump up against that statistic, because when I hear the phrase loneliness epidemic, my mind automatically goes to a very specific demographic.
Let me guess, older generations.
Yeah. I picture a senior citizen, a widow or widower living in a quiet house whose kids have moved across the country. That's the cultural image we've been fed, isn't it?
It's a very common assumption, but the data tells a radically different story. When you look at the research from the Surgeon General and the Kaiser Family Foundation, often referred to as KFF, they explicitly correct this misconception.
Okay, so what's the actual breakdown?
Older adults do face significant risks, absolutely. But the real shock is that 64% of young adults report feeling lonely.
64%.
Yeah, that's almost twice the rate of those over 65.
Wait, twice the rate? The demographic that is supposedly the most hyper-connected, constantly on social media, going to college, starting careers, they're the loneliest.
By a wide margin. And it's crucial to understand that this isn't just a post-pandemic hangover.
Right, because we blame 2020 for everything.
We really do. But the rates of loneliness among young adults have increased every single year from 1976 to 2019. So the pandemic didn't start the fire. It just poured gasoline on a structural blaze that had been burning for decades.
Okay, so if this has been rising since the late 70s, we can't just scapegoat smartphones and social media algorithms.
No, you can't.
There has to be a deeper, more foundational crack in the pavement. What's actually driving a nearly 50-year upward trend in human isolation?
Well, The World Health Organization points to something sociologists call the lost community hypothesis.
The lost community hypothesis.
Okay. Yeah, it's the idea that the core features of modernity itself, rapid industrialization, secularization, and urbanization, have systematically eroded the close-knit organic communities that humans actually evolved to live in.
So leaving the village, basically.
Exactly. For most of human history, we lived in interdependent villages. We traded that village for the sprawling metropolis, and in that trade-off, we gained incredible individual autonomy.
But we lost the safety net.
We sacrificed deep communal ties. We no longer rely on our neighbors for survival, which means, well, we no longer have to talk to them.
And it's not just this abstract philosophical loss of the village, right? The KFF survey data points out that loneliness runs on a parallel track with brutal, real-world hardships.
Oh, heavily.
It's tied directly to our material circumstances. They found that loneliness correlates heavily with physical health issues, the death of loved ones, and intensely with financial struggle.
The financial component is huge.
It is. In fact, 63% of adults earning under $50,000 a year are considered lonely. That's 10 percentage points higher than those earning over $50,000.
Which is a vital point to unpack. We often treat loneliness as a purely emotional failing, but poverty and financial stress act as massive, concrete barriers to social connection.
Like you literally can't afford to go out.
Right. Think about the mechanics of it. If you're working 2 or 3 gig economy jobs just to make rent, you don't have the time to join a local sports league.
Or host a dinner party.
You certainly don't have the disposable income to go out for drinks. Financial insecurity forces you into a state of survival, and survival is often a very solitary pursuit.
And when you're trapped in that survival mode for years, I mean, the psychological toll must be unimaginable. The sources highlight some data out of Japan that really gave me pause.
The 10-year stat.
Yes. They found that a staggering 35% of people experiencing loneliness say they felt that way for over 10 years.
Just brutal.
A decade of waking up and going to sleep without feeling like you belong anywhere.
The compounding effect of that kind of long-term isolation, it literally changes your brain chemistry.
Really? How so?
It heightens your threat response, making you more hypervigilant and actually making future social interactions feel more exhausting and dangerous.
So it feeds on itself.
Wow.
So we have this massive societal shift driven by economics and the sheer pace of modern life. But a huge chunk of our research stack today points to our physical environment, right? The actual concrete and drywall we surround ourselves with.
Yes, our built environment.
And this introduces a concept from sociologist Ray Oldenburg that I think is critical to this whole deep dive, the idea of the third place.
The third place is arguably the most important architectural and sociological framework for understanding this epidemic.
Let's break it down for the listener.
Sure. So Oldenburg breaks our lives down into 3 distinct zones. The first place is your home. That's your private sanctuary. The second place is your workplace or school, where you go to perform tasks and earn a living.
And the third place is?
The third place is everything in between. It's the informal, highly accessible public space where organic community actually happens.
So we're talking about local pubs, neighborhood parks, barbershops, diners, independent bookstores.
Exactly. They are spaces characterized by a few specific traits. They're mostly free or very cheap to enter. They have a leveling effect where your job title doesn't matter. And the main activity is simply conversation.
You just exist there.
Right. You can drop in, linger without feeling pressure to buy more things, and strike up a chat with someone you might not otherwise ever meet.
Now, if I'm listening to this while standing in line at a, corporate coffee chain, I might be thinking, okay, but isn't a coffee shop just a place to get my caffeine?
Right, a transactional space.
Yeah. If a local diner closes down and gets replaced by a drive-through bank, is that really a public health crisis? Why is a physical building so critical to my mental health?
It's the perfect question because on the surface, losing a diner just looks like a minor economic shift.
Yeah.
But to understand the true cost, we have to look at how humans build trust.
Okay, trust.
There's a theory by sociologist Mark Granovetter regarding weak ties, which leads to the concept of bridging social capital.
Let's break that down. What's the difference between the types of social capital?
Think of your bonding social capital as your strong ties. This is your immediate family, your partner, your very best friends. These are deep, emotionally intense relationships.
The people who would help you move.
Exactly. But bridging social capital is entirely made up of weak ties.
Like the barista who knows I always get an iced Americano, or the guy I always nod to at the dog park, or the people I see reading at the library.
Yes, exactly. They are acquaintances. And third places are essentially factories for producing these weak ties.
Oh, I like that. Factories for weak ties.
They mix diverse groups of people together in a very low-stakes environment. You might be sitting at a local pub next to a plumber, a retired teacher, and a college student. You all have different socioeconomic backgrounds, different political leanings, different life experiences. But because you share this third place, you interact.
And why are those casual, low-stakes interactions so vital to a functioning society?
Because they lower the transaction costs of existing in a community. They foster a baseline level of societal trust.
Right, because you see them regularly.
Yes, when you constantly interact with people outside your immediate bubble in a shared physical space, difference begins to feel normal rather than threatening. You realize the guy with the opposing political bumper sticker is also the guy who helped you find your lost dog last week.
It humanizes everyone.
Exactly. But without third places, we are left only with our strong ties.
Which sounds cozy, but it actually means our society becomes incredibly insular. We fragment into little defensive bubbles.
Highly defensive.
Like if I only ever talk to people who think exactly like me, vote exactly like me, and make the same amount of money as me, I lose the muscle memory of how to share space with people who are different.
And eventually, that fragmentation leads to severe polarization. You start viewing anyone outside your strong tie bubble not as a neighbor, but as an existential threat.
And the really tragic part is how the physical design of our world over the last 70 years has engineered these spaces right out of existence.
The suburban shift.
Right. The research dossier really hammers home the impact of post-war suburbanization. We systematically traded front porches and walkable neighborhood grids for fenced-in backyards, multi-car garages, and cul-de-sacs.
All in the name of the American dream, or modern living.
Yeah, we built these incredibly standardized, placeless suburbs where you literally cannot have a casual interaction because you are always securely inside your house or securely inside your car.
It's the architectural manifestation of isolation. We designed our built environment to maximize privacy and convenience, and in doing so, we accidentally optimized for loneliness.
Optimized for loneliness. That's a great way to put it.
When you remove the sidewalk and the local corner store, the opportunities for spontaneous, informal gatherings simply vanish.
Which perfectly transitions us into the macroeconomic fallout of this shift. Because if the organic third place is dying, that means the industries and businesses that traditionally operated as our communal gathering spots are taking an absolute beating.
They are hemorrhaging.
Yeah, we're looking at the immediate losers of this societal change, starting with the bedrock of traditional socialization, the nightlife industry.
The statistics coming out of the hospitality sector right now are incredibly sobering. Let's look at the UK, which has historically had one of the strongest pub cultures in the world.
Right, the local pub.
A pub in the UK isn't just a place to consume alcohol. For centuries, it has been the absolute center of community life, especially in rural villages. It's where you hear the news, celebrate, mourn, and debate. But between the year 2000 and 2024, the UK lost 35% of its pubs.
35%. That's a structural collapse.
We're talking about the permanent closure of roughly 750 pubs per year recently.
Wow.
And if we look at the United States, the nightclub and bar industry is facing what can only be described as a demographic cliff. According to the market reports we reviewed, the under 25 demographic now accounts for a mere 8.1% of spending in bars and nightclubs.
I want to pause on that because it completely shatters a major cultural trope.
It really does.
Like the entire idea of your early 20s, at least as portrayed in movies, television, and pop culture for the last 50 years, is fundamentally centered on going out to clubs, standing in line, shouting over loud music, and mingling in crowded bars. And you're telling me that demographic is now responsible for less than 10% of the industry's revenue.
It's evaporating. The behavioral shift is profound, and it ties directly into the data we have from the Leger and Circana reports on what's being called the sober curious generation.
The sober curious generation.
Yeah, the data shows that overall, 49% of Americans are actively trying to drink less alcohol in 2025.
Almost half the country.
But when you isolate Gen Z, it's a staggering 65% who plan to drink less, and nearly 19% of Gen Z who do not consume alcohol at all.
So what's the mechanism here? If I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a 22-year-old today, is this just a hyperfixation on wellness? Are they just tracking their REM sleep on their smart rings and deciding alcohol ruins their recovery score? Or is there a harsher economic reality driving this avoidance of bars?
It's a fascinating confluence of both wellness and harsh economics. When surveyed, 58% of Gen Z cite mental health as their primary reason for cutting back.
Which makes sense. They're very therapy fluent.
Very much so. This is a generation that is highly literate in mental health terminology. They are acutely aware that alcohol is a depressant, and they are actively prioritizing emotional stability and mental clarity over a night of binge drinking. But you absolutely cannot ignore the economic mechanism.
The price tag.
Exactly. 39% cite financial considerations as the primary driver.
Right. Because if you're dealing with historically high rent, soaring inflation on basic groceries, and crippling student loan debt, the idea of paying $18 for a single cocktail, which has, what, a 400% markup, is mathematically impossible to justify.
Exactly. The value proposition of a traditional bar is broken for them. Historically, you paid that massive markup on the alcohol because you were essentially paying a cover charge for the social connection.
Ah, that's such a good point.
You bought the overpriced drink to gain access to the third place. But if you feel you can get social connection elsewhere, or worse, if you feel too socially anxious to even attempt mingling in a loud, unpredictable room, you simply stop buying the drinks.
And it's not like they're just sitting in the dark staring at the wall. They're swapping out the alcohol for alternatives. The research notes a huge surge in THC and CBD-infused drinks, or highly complex zero-proof mocktails.
Right, the beverage market is still there.
But the key difference is where they are consuming them. They're drinking them at home in small, highly controlled groups rather than in massive, high-overhead nightclubs.
Which breaks the traditional hospitality business model. A nightclub relies on high fixed costs, rent, insurance, security, DJs, offset by massive volume and high-margin alcohol sales. When the youngest, traditionally most active demographic walks away from both volume and alcohol, the math no longer works.
The whole house of cards falls.
It really does. But this apocalypse isn't just restricted to nightlife. We're seeing a parallel collapse in traditional brick-and-mortar retail and mid-tier live events.
Let's talk about retail, because shopping fundamentally used to be a third-place activity.
Absolutely. The mall.
The mall. Going to the mall was the definitive teenage social experience of the 80s and 90s. You didn't necessarily go to buy something, you went to browse, to eat a pretzel, to see people, and to be seen. It was a communal activity.
Now it's a ghost town.
Yeah. Now, the data shows over 90% of consumers in the US and China make online-only purchases. We have systematically stripped the social function entirely out of commerce.
We have optimized the transaction for ultimate convenience, but the cost of that convenience is human contact. We've removed the cashier, the fellow shopper, the security guard, the mall walker.
Everyone is gone.
And you see this exact same phenomenon bleeding into the restaurant industry. I know you flagged a very interesting report on this from Fox News in our sources.
I did, because it perfectly captures how our social norms are bending to accommodate this isolation. The Fox News reporting highlighted a trend that Yum Brands, the corporate parent of Taco Bell and KFC, is calling the me economy.
The me economy. Wow.
Yeah, they noted that quick-service restaurant visits by solo diners now account for nearly half of all trips. Half. Think about the historical context of that.
It's wild.
Even 20 years ago, eating alone in public carried a massive social stigma. If you were sitting alone in a booth, people whispered. They assumed you'd been stood up or that something was wrong with you.
The stigma was a powerful enforcer of social cohesion.
But that stigma is entirely gone now. It's been replaced by this overwhelming cultural desire for personal autonomy. The desire to put your AirPods in, order from a touchscreen kiosk, eat your food while watching a video on your phone, and move entirely at your own pace without having to negotiate or compromise with anyone else.
It's the absolute atomization of the consumer. You are no longer part of a dining public. You are a solitary node of consumption.
A solitary node. That's bleak.
It is bleak. But here is the critical insight we have to bridge to. Just because people are avoiding bars, abandoning shopping malls, and eating alone does not mean the fundamental human biological need for connection has disappeared.
Right, the desire is still there.
The need is still deeply embedded in our DNA. It has just been displaced. And nature, especially the free market, abhors a vacuum.
If the physical places of connection are dead or dying, all that unspent human longing and capital has to go somewhere. Which brings us to the core of today's deep dive. Enter the loneliness economy.
Here we go.
If the organic village is gone, what is replacing it? And more importantly, who is profiting off our isolation?
So, the loneliness economy is an emerging academic and market term used to describe a rapidly expanding, highly lucrative ecosystem. Market estimates currently place this sector anywhere from $500 billion to the multi-trillions, depending on how broadly you define the services involved.
Multi-trillions.
Yeah. Academically, it's defined as an ecosystem of goods, services, and platforms that profit from the growing prevalence of social isolation by monetizing synthetic substitutes for belonging.
Monetizing synthetic substitutes for belonging.
Yeah.
It's a deeply chilling phrase.
It really is.
Companionship, which used to be a free byproduct of living in a community, can now be bought, streamed, or rented by the hour. To really understand the mechanics of how this economy captures us, our research dossier provided some brilliant business frameworks. Let's look at this through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Most of us vaguely remember the colorful pyramid from a high school psychology class.
It's a foundational framework. At the very bottom of the pyramid, you have your physiological needs: food, water, basic shelter, sleep. Moving up to the second tier, you have safety and security, employment, personal security, health.
Okay, the basics are covered.
Right. Once those foundational needs are relatively met, human beings are intensely biologically motivated by the third tier, love and belonging. This is friendship, intimacy, family, a sense of connection. What we're witnessing in affluent modern nations is a structural failure at Tier 3.
Meaning we have, broadly speaking, built a society that solves for survival, but starves us of belonging. We have the food and the locked front door, but no one to share the house with.
Precisely. The loneliness economy recognizes that massive void at the third tier and rushes in to fill it. But it fills it with commercial products instead of organic relationships.
That makes perfect sense on a macro societal level. But I wanted to understand the micro level. Why do I, as a supposedly rational individual, actively choose to engage with these synthetic substitutes? This is where the jobs to be done framework from our notes completely shifted my perspective.
Oh, jobs to be done is such a great lens for this.
The theory is that consumers don't just idly buy products, they quote-unquote hire them to perform a specific job in their lives.
Yes. When you're analyzing consumer behavior, the most revealing question is always, what is the underlying emotional job you are hiring this product to do?
So, let me use my own habits as an analogy. When I come home to an empty apartment after a long day, I will almost immediately turn on a 3-hour conversational podcast, or I'll throw a Twitch streamer on my TV while I chop vegetables for dinner.
A very common routine.
Right. Now, if you ask me why I'm doing that, I'd probably say, oh, for entertainment. But that's not true.
Yeah.
Because half the time, I'm not actively listening to what they're saying. I'm not absorbing the interview or watching the gameplay. The job I am actually hiring that media for is to break the silence.
You're hiring it for presence.
Yes. I'm hiring it so the acoustics of my apartment change, so I don't feel like the only breathing thing in the room.
You are hiring it for ambient companionship. It's a brilliant example. You are paying either with your subscription dollars or your attention to ads to secure the sensory illusion of a populated space.
The sensory illusion.
And the beauty of this for the consumer is that it provides the warmth of human presence without requiring the energetic output or the social risk of actually interacting with a real human being. You don't have to look nice. You don't have to be witty. You just get the comfort of the voice.
And it's not just digital media. Traditional corporate brands are looking at this exact same phenomenon and desperately trying to figure out how to monetize it in the physical world.
They want in on it.
Oh, absolutely. They see the death of the organic third place, and they are trying to artificially manufacture it inside their stores to save their retail footprint. You see lifestyle brands like Lululemon clearing out racks of leggings to offer in-store yoga classes, or Starbucks explicitly stating in their corporate strategy that they want to be the ultimate third place between home and work.
But there is a fundamental, almost fatal flaw in their approach, which becomes glaringly obvious when you analyze how corporate spaces are designed to operate. A true organic third place, like a dive bar or a crowded public park, has inherent friction.
Friction, meaning it's not perfect.
Right. You might have to share a table with someone you profoundly disagree with politically. You have to navigate complex, unwritten social norms. Somebody might be too loud, someone might spill a drink. But corporate retail spaces are meticulously engineered to be perfectly frictionless.
And friction is exactly what the Gartner report in our sources warned corporate boards about.
Oh, yes. The Gartner report.
They found that consumers are increasingly bringing broader societal tensions Intense debates over race, gender, political ideology into retail stores. Brands are absolutely terrified of this. They want to curate perfectly smooth, unchallenging environments where everyone is just a happy, pacified consumer.
But you cannot have a real community without friction. Community requires navigating disagreement.
Exactly. If a space is perfectly frictionless and aggressively policed by brand guidelines to ensure nobody's ever uncomfortable, it isn't a community. It's just a waiting room with a cash register.
Such a great way to describe it.
Sociologist Tressie McMillan-Cottom provides a really sharp critique of this in our sources. She observes that when massive corporations attempt to artificially engineer a third place, they inevitably end up commodifying diversity.
Which is a really complex issue.
She notes that in many of these highly curated, expensive corporate cafes, they create spaces where, in her words, white people can consume an idea that they're being in a diverse public.
That is a staggering observation.
Meaning, you walk into this beautifully designed corporate coffee shop, there's indie music playing, there's a carefully selected mix of people on laptops, and you get the aesthetic vibe of being in a bustling, diverse, urban neighborhood. But you get it without any of the actual cultural exchange, the friction, or the deeply rooted, messy relationships that define a real neighborhood.
It's a sterile simulation.
It's a brand using diversity as a tactical toolkit to sell a $7 latte.
It is the illusion of community, sanitized for your protection. It's connection without obligation. And if you understand that concept, connection without obligation, you understand the defining ethos of the ultimate winners in the loneliness economy.
Connection without obligation.
They offer the feeling of being intimately connected while stripping away all the messy, unpredictable obligations of actual human relationships.
Let's talk about those victors then. If traditional retail and physical nightlife are hemorrhaging money because people are staying home, that capital hasn't just evaporated, it's been aggressively reallocated.
It's moving online.
And that brings us to the companies waiting inside those isolated apartments.
Huh?
We have to start with the absolute juggernaut of the loneliness economy, gaming. The global gaming industry is now a $187.7 billion market.
It's massive.
To put that in perspective, it is larger than the global film box office and the recorded music industry combined. But calling them games feels almost reductive when you look at how people actually use them.
It's highly reductive. If you analyze platforms like Roblox, which boasts around 88 million daily active users, or Discord, which serves over 200 million monthly active users, their core function has fundamentally evolved.
They aren't just games anymore.
No, they are no longer just games you play with a defined start, a win state, and a loss state. They have transformed into digital third places. They are providing the substitute social infrastructure for an entire generation.
I see this constantly with my younger cousins. They don't call each other on a Friday night to say, hey, let's meet up at the mall. They say, get on Fortnite or join the Discord server. They aren't even necessarily playing the objective of the game. They're just using the digital lobby as a place to hang out, talk about their day, and exist in a shared space.
Because these digital platforms provide exactly what the physical built environment is increasingly denying them. They offer a highly structured environment, a clear sense of identity through avatars and roles, a shared sense of purpose through gameplay, and instant community.
Without having to leave the house.
And crucially, it completely removes the intense biological anxiety of in-person events. You can be whoever you want to be. You control your appearance. And if a social interaction gets too stressful or if you feel rejected, there's an immediate escape hatch.
You just log off.
You simply click log off. You have total, absolute control over the friction.
But it's not just in these digital fantasy worlds where people are seeking comfort. We also see the mechanics of loneliness profoundly altering how we consume physical goods. Let's talk about e-commerce and the psychology of buying things simply to fill an emotional void.
This is where compensatory consumption comes in.
Right. Our sources included a fascinating systematic review from the journal Frontiers in Psychology on consumer loneliness. They dive deeply into this behavior called compensatory consumption.
Compensatory consumption is a heavily documented psychological phenomenon. It's the mechanism where, when an individual feels a severe deficit in their social connections, they actively use consumption, the act of buying goods or services, to compensate for that lack.
Buying your way out of sadness, basically.
Essentially, yes. They are attempting to self-medicate their deeply unmet needs for belonging and self-esteem through the dopamine hit of a transaction.
There was a really poignant case study in the research from 2018 by Smith and colleagues that looked at consumers in India. They found that lonely and isolated individuals in these communities were actively using physical in-store shopping as a primary social experience.
It's a fascinating counterpoint to what we see in the West.
Right. They weren't going to the market because they urgently needed a specific item. They were going to forge connections with shopkeepers, to haggle, to chat with other shoppers. The purchase itself was entirely secondary. The primary goal, the job they were hiring the store to do, was just to provide an excuse to talk to another human being.
Which is a beautiful yet tragic example of using the marketplace as a makeshift community center. But we have to look at how drastically the global marketplace has shifted since that 2018 study. Globally, the dominant economic trend has been the explosion of e-commerce, which has systematically isolated the transaction.
Right, and the McKinsey data we have on Gen Z's consumer habits is wild when you view it through this lens. The data shows that Gen Z is willing to pay remarkably high premiums for food and grocery delivery apps.
Uber Eats, DoorDash, all of those.
Exactly. Demographically, they have the least amount of disposable income. They're facing high inflation, yet they will willingly pay a 30% menu markup plus delivery fees and tips just to have a meal left on their doorstep. Why? Yes, it's convenient. But the psychology suggests they are actively paying a financial premium to avoid the social friction of going to a grocery store, making awkward small talk with a cashier, or navigating the sensory overload of a crowded restaurant.
It creates a devastatingly effective, vicious cycle. They feel isolated and socially anxious, so they lean into the frictionless convenience of digital delivery to avoid the stress of human interaction. But by avoiding that interaction, their social muscles atrophy further.
Which isolates them even more.
Which isolates them even more, deepens their baseline loneliness, and makes the prospect of the next social interaction feel even more daunting. They become trapped in a self-perpetuating convenience loop, and the delivery apps profit at every rotation of that cycle.
And while they're sitting in their apartment eating that expensive delivery food alone, they're likely watching something. Which brings us to the streaming giants, Netflix, Spotify, YouTube. These companies are structurally and financially built to benefit from solitary living.
The math is very straightforward.
Think about the basic math of a subscription model. If 4 people live in a house and watch TV together in the living room, Netflix gets one $15 subscription. But if society atomizes, and those 4 people move into 4 separate studio apartments to live alone, Netflix suddenly gets 4 subscriptions.
The financial incentives of the entire media landscape are perfectly aligned with the breakdown of the household and the rise of the solitary consumer. But it's not just the subscription math. The content itself is mutating to serve this isolated demographic. This is where we see the explosion of parasocial relationships as a primary economic driver.
Let's really unpack parasocial relationships because the scale of this is mind-bending. For anyone unfamiliar, a parasocial relationship is a one-sided psychological bond where a viewer feels a deep, genuine sense of intimacy, friendship, and trust with a media figure, a creator, an influencer, a podcaster, while that creator has absolutely no idea who the viewer is.
It's highly asymmetric intimacy.
Yeah. Influencers, daily Twitch streamers, and VTubers, which are virtual YouTubers who stream using motion-captured animated anime avatars, are generating billions of dollars off this exact psychological dynamic.
It is ambient companionship monetized at a scale previously unimaginable. For the lonely viewer, a parasocial relationship is incredibly appealing because it hacks the brain's friendship circuitry without any of the real-world downsides.
Right, it's safe.
You get the warmth of a personality, you learn their mannerisms, you share inside jokes with the chat community, you feel a sense of shared history. But you carry zero social risk. The influencer will never reject you. They will never cancel plans at the last minute. They will never judge you for what you're wearing. It is profound intimacy stripped entirely of vulnerability.
But here is where we cross from slightly depressing into genuinely dystopian territory.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's one thing to watch a YouTuber for 3 hours a day and feel like you're friends. It's a completely different level of societal shift when you open your wallet to literally buy a friend. We have to examine the darkest edge of the loneliness economy, the commercialization of digital intimacy, and the mental health industrial complex.
The direct commercialization of intimacy is expanding rapidly across different cultures. Our research highlights services in Japan like the rent-a-friend industry, where you can legally rent an asan, which translates to a middle-aged man by the hour.
You literally rent a person.
You pay them to listen to your work problems, to give you fatherly advice, or literally just to sit across from you in a cafe so you don't look lonely to the other patrons. It is a stark, direct financial transaction for human presence.
And while we might look at that as a quirk of Japanese culture, in the West, we are seeing the exact same impulse driving the massive proliferation of digital therapy apps and AI companions. Look at a company like BetterHelp, which generates over $1 billion in revenue.
Which is an astonishing figure.
Now, obviously, providing accessible therapy is vital, and telehealth has real benefits. But the sheer staggering scale of the demand tells you how utterly desperate the population is for a sympathetic ear. And when human therapists are too expensive or fully booked, the market provides the ultimate frictionless substitute AI chatbots.
We are seeing massive engagement with applications like Replica or AI-powered cognitive behavioral therapy bots like Wobot. These platforms provide immediate, hyper-personalized 247 interaction for profoundly lonely people.
And the AI is programmed to like you.
The AI is algorithmically designed to always be interested in you. It remembers your preferences, it validates your feelings, it never gets bored of your stories. For someone suffering from acute, dangerous levels of isolation, we have to acknowledge that this technology provides meaningful, sometimes life-saving interaction in the short term.
But I feel a massive but coming here regarding the long-term effects.
There is a massive but. While an AI companion provides immediate soothing relief, it fundamentally traps the user in a synthetic, emotional loop. Think about the mechanics of human growth. If you outsource all your emotional needs to a generative AI that is programmed to never disagree with you and is perfectly tailored to your every whim, your tolerance for the messy, frustrating, unpredictable nature of real human beings drops to absolute zero.
Because humans are hard.
You lose the psychological muscle memory required to compromise. You are effectively soothing the symptom of loneliness while ensuring the underlying disease, the inability to navigate friction and connect with real, flawed people becomes permanent and incurable.
So we have all these different platforms, gaming, e-commerce, AI companions, dating apps, all servicing this same massive pool of lonely consumers. Let's compare the revenue engines of isolation. How do these platforms actually extract value? What are the specific mechanics they use to turn our lack of connection into quarterly profits?
It's a fascinating, if slightly grim, study in platform economics. Let's start with gaming. Historically, the industry model was simple. You paid $60 upfront for a cartridge or disc, and you owned the game. But the industry has largely transitioned away from that toward the free-to-play or F2P model. Today, free-to-play games generate roughly 85% of all global game revenue.
Which sounds like a paradox. If the game is entirely free to download and play, how are they generating nearly $200 billion a year?
Because in a free-to-play ecosystem, you don't play for free. You pay with one of two distinct currencies, your money or your time.
Okay, let's look at the money first.
If you have money, you participate via microtransactions. You buy battle passes, you buy cosmetic skins, or unique outfits for your digital avatar. And why do people spend real money on virtual clothes? Because, as we established, these games are digital third places. Your digital skin is your primary status symbol.
Like wearing designer clothes.
It is the exact psychological equivalent of wearing a Rolex or limited edition designer sneakers to a physical nightclub. You are buying social status to elevate your standing within the community.
Okay, so that's the whales, the small percentage of players who spend huge amounts of money. But what about the millions of kids who don't have credit cards? How does the platform extract value from them?
If you don't have money, you pay with your time. You grind for hours, completing repetitive tasks to unlock free items. But crucially, by simply being logged in and walking around the digital world, you provide what economists call the network effect.
You populate the servers?
A digital world with no people in it is dead. The lonely teenager playing 8 hours a day for free is literally acting as the digital scenery. They are the content that keeps the paying players, the whales, engaged. The free player provides the crowd, and the platform monetizes that crowd.
That is brilliant business and psychologically terrifying. You're essentially working as an unpaid extra in a digital movie, so the studio can charge the lead actors for their costumes.
That's a perfect analogy.
Now contrast that mechanism with dating apps. We're looking at a $6.1 $8 billion market, heavily consolidated under Match Group, which owns Tinder, Hinge, OkCupid, and dozens of others. The mechanics of the dating app paradox are perhaps the most cynical business model in the entire loneliness economy.
It's a model built entirely on tension, because profound loneliness creates an urgent, emotionally charged willingness to pay. If you are sitting on your couch on a Friday night, desperately seeking a romantic partner, you will gladly pay exorbitant fees for premium features.
Right, to jump the line.
You buy boosts to jump to the front of the queue, or gold memberships to see who liked you, or super likes to signal intent. You are paying just to be visible in the algorithm.
But the dark economic truth of a dating app, the core paradox, is that the platform's financial success is completely at odds with your personal success. Let's say the algorithm is perfect. It works flawlessly. You download the app, and on day one, it introduces you to the absolute love of your life.
You get married and you're happy.
What do? You delete the app. The company permanently loses a customer. Therefore, they profit the absolute most when you remain hopeful enough to keep swiping, but ultimately unsuccessful for years. They are monetizing the search for connection, not the connection itself. It is one of the only industries on Earth where if the product works perfectly, the user base shrinks.
Exactly. They have to carefully meter out dopamine hits a match here, a message there to keep you on the hook without actually satisfying the core need. Now, compare that delicate balancing act to how e-commerce and AI subscriptions operate. E-commerce relies on frictionless volume. They want you to click buy now with zero hesitation.
Right, one-click ordering.
But AI chatbots and digital partners use advanced behavioral economics, specifically leveraging concepts like loss aversion and present bias to create incredibly deep emotional dependencies.
Let's break those terms down. What does present bias mean in the context of an AI friend?
Present bias is the human tendency to overvalue immediate rewards and heavily discount long-term consequences. It's the voice in your head saying, I want relief right now, I'll worry about the fallout later. Building a real human friendship is hard work. It takes months of awkward coffee dates, scheduling conflicts, vulnerability, and navigating misunderstandings. But downloading an AI companion offers immediate, guaranteed, perfectly calibrated affection tonight. Present bias ensures that a lonely, exhausted person will choose the immediate comfort of the AI over the arduous work of human connection.
And once they make that choice, that's where loss aversion kicks in.
Precisely. Loss aversion is the psychological principle that the pain of losing something is twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining it. Once a user spends 6 months talking to an AI every day, forming a bond, training it on their personality, canceling that $15 a month subscription doesn't feel like canceling a gym membership.
It feels like breaking up.
It feels like abandoning a close friend. To some, it feels akin to killing a pet. The platform has effectively weaponized your own emotional attachment against you, ensuring that the revenue retention on these subscriptions is staggeringly high.
This is just incredible to untangle. We have engineered an entire multi-trillion-dollar economic engine that runs purely on the fumes of our isolation.
It's an engine of isolation, yeah.
But let's bring it back to the macro picture as we move toward our conclusion.
Yeah.
Because I think it's easy to dismiss loneliness as a purely personal tragedy, something that just happens quietly behind closed doors. But the data shows this is a massive macroeconomic drain.
The systemic, tangible costs to society are phenomenal. The Berkeley Economic Review published data analyzing the financial impact, and they found that in the U.S. alone, loneliness costs the broader economy roughly $400 billion annually.
$400 billion. How does a feeling cost $500 billion?
Through the compounding effects of absenteeism, lost productivity, and massively inflated healthcare costs. Lonely workers are less emotionally engaged with their jobs, they are more prone to burnout, they miss more days of work, and they suffer from exponentially higher rates of chronic illness, heart disease, stroke, dementia that heavily tax the healthcare system.
It's a cascading failure.
It operates as a massive deadweight loss on the economy. It is essentially the equivalent of a major financial recession happening every single year completely silently.
So if you are a traditional business owner listening to this, maybe you run a local restaurant or retail shop or a community space, how do you adapt to this reality ethically? How do physical businesses survive this massive behavioral shift without resorting to the predatory tactics of the digital platforms?
The businesses that will survive the death of the generic third place are the ones that recognize they can no longer just sell a commodity, they have to sell a highly curated, low-friction shared experience. You can't just open a dive bar and expect people to show up and talk to strangers anymore. The friction is too high.
So what's the alternative?
We are seeing a massive resurgence of specialized venues. Bars are pivoting to host zero-proof pop-ups, creating vibrant nightlife spaces that remove the alcohol barrier for the sober-curious generation. We are seeing incredibly successful hybrid models like board game cafes or bar arcades.
That makes total sense. If I go to a traditional bar, I have to figure out how to awkwardly start a conversation with a stranger based on nothing. But if I go to a barcade, I don't have to carry the burden of the interaction. We can just stand next to each other playing Pac-Man.
Exactly.
The game is the focal point, and the conversation is secondary, which means the social friction is drastically lowered.
You are providing a scaffolding for interaction. To survive, physical businesses must embrace the framework of the experience economy. They must stop selling the beer or the coffee and start selling the genuine, authentic connection. And on a macro governmental level, we are starting to see institutions recognize that social connection is a vital public good that requires deliberate intervention.
The UK appointing a minister of loneliness is probably the most famous example of that.
Yeah.
It's a stark recognition that leaving the creation of community entirely up to the free market has failed.
It's an acknowledgement that the social fabric of a nation doesn't just naturally weave itself. It requires deliberate maintenance, funding, and architectural planning.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together and recap the incredible journey we've been on today. We started by looking at the sheer, staggering scale of the loneliness epidemic and how the loss of our physical third places, those organic, messy spaces of community friction, has left half the population isolated.
And we saw the fallout.
Right. We saw how traditional industries, from neighborhood pubs to shopping malls, are taking massive financial hits as younger generations retreat into solitary, highly convenient digital lives.
And we explored how the multi-trillion-dollar loneliness economy has rushed in to harvest that void. We looked at the mechanisms from the massive gaming industry acting as digital third places powered by the network effect, to the monetization of parasocial relationships, all the way to dating apps and AI companions that use behavioral economics to profit endlessly off our search for connection.
We have systematically traded the unpredictable, friction-filled beauty of the physical village for the perfectly frictionless comfort of a food delivery app and a Twitch stream. Which leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over as you go about your day.
It's a big one.
The next time you open an app on your phone, or order delivery specifically to avoid interacting with a cashier, or boot up a multiplayer game, ask yourself, what job are you really hiring that technology to do? Are you genuinely looking for convenience, or are you actively avoiding the friction of being human? We have engineered a society that feeds us the frictionless, empty calories of digital connection, leaving us utterly starving for the actual complex nutrients of a real community. And as we continue to build AI that never disagrees with us, and commerce that never requires us to speak, are we designing a world so perfectly frictionless for the individual that there's simply no room left for anyone else?
A world without friction is a world without traction. You simply cannot build anything lasting on a perfectly smooth surface.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll see you next time.